Hello, and welcome to this live webinar on trying to get closer to a 100% response rate for your 360-degree feedback. And also welcome if you're watching this on a replay version. We often get asked this working with organizations who are using 360-degree feedback. They put a lot of work into designing the 360, preparing it as part of a development program. And then sometimes the results are not so great because people don't get enough feedback. There's not enough engagement. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating for the organization who've put resources into this. And it's frustrating for the people who are receiving feedback because if they get maybe 40, 50% of the feedback that they've asked for, can feel a little bit deflating and a little bit discouraging. There are ways that many organizations actually get close to 100% feedback response rate. We work with organizations, some of whom get between 80 and 100% response rate. So I was thinking about what are the common characteristics, what are the things that these organizations do to get such a good response rate? Well, the first thing, and I know it's obvious, but it is important, is preparation and pre-communication. Now, even though you think you might have done some explanation, you might have briefed the people who are getting feedback, there's a whole load of other people out there in your organization who maybe don't understand it fully. They might have preconceptions. They might have done 360 before in a different way. They might have positive or negative memories of that. So if you think you've done enough preparation and enough communication, then do some more, because I've seen that the organizations who do the most preparation, the most briefing of all stakeholders are the ones that will get the highest rates of response. And along with that, make it easy and painless, which I will go on to in a second. Giving feedback is voluntary. It's a voluntary activity. So we've got to make it, for the people who are giving the feedback, we've got to make it rewarding and a little bit of fun. Now, as far as reward is concerned, I wouldn't suggest giving out prizes for giving a bit of feedback to your colleague. But you could, for example, make a competition out of it. Teams that do the most feedback or receive the most feedback get some sort of recognition for that. It's about associating the feedback with something positive. One of our clients, one of our corporate clients, has created a brilliant 1-minute video. Now, okay, that takes a little bit of work, but actually what it does, it really brings the 360 to life, and it talks about the reasons for the 360. And they also link in the video and in the 360, they link the whole process with positive outcomes, development opportunities, and an accreditation for the person that's got the feedback. So people feel they're involved in something that's meaningful, and that's interesting to do. The other common characteristic to get better response rates is not to overburden the respondents with long questionnaires. Sometimes I know it's tempting to ask everything. So if you're doing a bespoke 360, for instance, to put in all of the competencies, all of the things that you would like to measure. That's okay in some ways, and I'll talk about that later. But actually, a very long questionnaire can be very off-putting and can really reduce your response rate. So be aware that having a shorter questionnaire that's more succinct and also relevant for the organization and bespoke to the organization will really help with your response rate. And what's a good questionnaire length? I would say maybe between 30, 35 questions altogether, including ratings and text questions, is usually a nice length, and will get you good quality response and numbers of responses. And also keep the process for people, keep it simple. Sometimes it's tempting to have a complicated login process or approvals process. If you can, do that in the background. Users need to have a process that's easy and quick to do. And if you do that, you're likely to get a better rate of response for all of the feedback. Moving on to another common characteristic is a sense of purpose and direction from the leadership of the organization. We worked recently with a company in the UAE, and it was their first 360, and it was for the senior management team. They were very clear on their objectives, and they clearly communicated and demonstrated their enthusiasm for receiving feedback. And this is such a strong message for the people who've been asked to give feedback. So you can imagine if somebody very senior is asking for feedback and they're taking it seriously, then you will want to be involved in that activity. Guess how much feedback each member of the 9-strong senior management team got? 100%. So very important to have the sponsorship and the involvement of senior teams, and ideally for them to be the first people to go through the 360 process to demonstrate that. So next up is real trust in the organization and the process. Now, of course, if there is suspicion about the motives more broadly of the organization or the senior teams, then it's going to be a tough one to get a good response rate on the 360. If there's an underlying lack of trust for whatever reason, you will struggle to get people to engage. They will worry about what will happen to the data, what the real reason behind it is, and so forth. That's why I would suggest not doing 360 if there's a difficult organizational situation going on, because people will have potentially a lack of trust. Now, an organization we worked with for many years has actually built up trust through a consistent use of the 360 tool. So the way they do it and the way they've overcome those issues, excuse me, of what's going to happen and what it's for, is that they run the 360 every year as a confidential process where only the coach who is coaching the people getting feedback sees written comments, which are anonymous. And the only thing that the managing director sees is the ratings. So the managing director only gets an overview of ratings for each individual, but doesn't see the more detailed written feedback. And the coach does not necessarily, or actually in any way, convey the detailed written feedback to the managing director. So individuals have come to feel confident in the process, both in the feedback that they get and their development, and also people giving the feedback have come to trust the process as well. Excuse me 1 second, I'm just going to turn this alarm off. So next, in terms of getting responses, is the really pushing and pulling. I mean, let's be honest, 360-degree feedback needs a lot of pushing and pulling. So no matter how strong a feedback culture you've got in your organization, people are busy, they've got lots of things to do, they will be enthusiastic, they'll want to help their colleagues, but they will have other things to prioritize. So it's important to use different channels for both pulling them in and pushing them out in order to do the feedback. So you have your regular reminder emails, but also it's nice to do communications through maybe team meetings, maybe have a quick catch up on the feedback in regular team meetings to remind people to respond. Similarly, case studies, if there is feedback coming out and people are receiving it, then put some case studies out on the intranet. Talk about how important it is and how easy it is to give feedback. So you've got some nice encouragement for people to do their 360 for their colleagues. So 100% or near 100% is achievable, but there does need some work to achieve that. To summarize, the common features of organizations that get high response rate are, firstly, they include the senior management team or get the senior management team's involvement and sponsorship. They have a simple and uncomplicated process. They use relatively short, bespoke questionnaires, and they ask clear, concise, and behaviourally based questions. They put a lot of effort into communicating, and they take into account communications for all stakeholders. That includes both the people getting the feedback, respondents, line managers, and others who are involved. They follow up with multi-channel reminders and descriptions and case studies and stories to encourage people to carry on with the 360 process. And they create a feel-good, positive element or atmosphere around the 360. Recognition, enthusiasm, what are we doing with the 360 to take us all forward? And that can really, really help to get a good response rate for your 360. Thanks for listening.